here. Make sure I'm coming in looking all bald. What is happening, everybody? Everybody's having a fantastic whatever it is that you're watching this. So we are going to talk about combinations that work. We're talking some 5.7, some 6.4, and we're going to be talking about some Kitty Cat. So get your questions queued up now, because once I get started and once I start yammering on, it might be kind of hard to fit questions in. So those of y'all that are getting in early, got questions early, you're going to make out like a bandit. But if you're later in, I apologize now for not being able to get to you. So let me get a few folks in here and then we're going to get going. Okay, check it in, say hello. B got the arm flex. I like it. Slash, check it in, saying hello. What up, Slash? So the whole reason for this video is, obviously, you always hear, I get a lot of questions. What is it funny about every YouTuber? I get a lot of questions. Really? A lot? Like, do you get a lot of questions or do you just get a few questions? Well, the thing is that all of my questions are pretty well documented because I have a live show that a lot of people ask me questions about various combinations. And so I've kind of put together some answers to the questions, you know, kind of Jeopardy style in a way, if you want to think of it that way. In other words, what is camshaft with this duration plus this intake, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to go through that. No, I'm not going to be talking about V6s, by the way. Doesn't apply here. Okay, saying, I got no questions. It's here to learn and listen. Well, good. I'm happy to have you. Boost is saying, hey, B Macy got the arm flex. Quick Bragg saying, what up, buddy? What up, Quick? We got to get together soon, my man. By the way, it was a fuel quality issue. What the? Boostain to the rescue. We'll get to that a little bit later. Donald's asking, hey, B, what metallic substrate catalytic converter do you like best? If you obviously running long tubes, Cook's. That's my favorite for fitment and for flow. Really, yeah, to be honest with you, all of them are pretty good. 200 cell per inch is what you're looking at. As long as it is a 200 cell per inch metal substrate catalytic converter, you are good to go. Smoking at 5 saying, hi to Professor B. What's up? Oh, back to the catalytic converters. Don't get one of those Coke bottle size catalytic converters. That's not going to do any good. You need something that's at least about as big around as a Big Mac. All right. Yes, that is a unit of measure. It is Big Mac sized. No, seriously. The little bitty Coke bottle size ones, they just not enough area. Too much of the available area is held up by metal substrate catalytic converter. So just know that. But most of the stuff from the aftermarket is pretty good. Let's see. Sunfire guy saying, just put a new 18 intake manifold on his 15 GT with a tune. I went from power till 6,200 and 6,500 Redline Limited and making power all the way up to 7,500. That is correct. 5.0s. I love them. So let's get into combinations that work. First of all, in answer to any of y'all's questions, just so y'all know, yes, the fuel quality issue is a real thing. And I will be moving forward to probably touching up my fuel mix with a little bit of boostain. Let me tell you why. Been running into some issues with fuel quality lately. And here's the silly thing about this is that the Hellcats have a pretty hot tune from the factory as it is. And even when you throw fuel at them, the stock tune is practically ideal for those cars in most conditions in terms of timing, just by throwing fuel at it. They ride the knock sensors pretty hard. Well, the problem with all of that is that they do ride the knock sensors real hard, and you end up with a situation where even with stock timing values, you can run into some decent knock retard numbers. Most of the time it's false, but I had some at the drag strip last time I was out. And so in some testing today, threw a little bit of boostain, basically just a couple of shot glasses, and knock retard, no mo. So that being said, slightly higher density altitude, or if for you guys that are into car nerd stuff, cylinder air charge was just a little bit shy of what it was before, but it was still within the noise, so I'm going to let it ride. We need some crazy DA to actually validate that, but I wasn't running the car in crazy DA when it had knock retard. So fuel quality is a thing, guys. If y'all are out there running around with some tunes that are set to kill and you're on 93 octane, you might want to reevaluate that, maybe pull about a degree of timing out of that just to be on the safe side. If not, throw some butane in there and call it good. So let's get into this because, by the way, that's your public service announcement. So let's start talking about, I don't know, should I start with 5.7s? Should I start with 392s? It's kind of funny because 5.7 is a longer topic. So let's go ahead and start with 5.7s. What works? First of all, congratulations on having a 5.7 Charger or Challenger. Love those cars to death. I know that a lot of folks will view them as like hind tit type of performance car. That's not accurate exactly at all. It's still a solid 13-second car. There was a point in history where that would have been the absolute top of the food chain in terms of acceleration. So just know that coming into it. Don't let anybody let you suffer by comparison. That's actually a really cool car that you've got. But if you're looking to hot rod it, the good thing is that, well, you've got basically the aftermarket at your feet. We can talk about the scat packages, but for purposes of practical conversation, that just doesn't fit. Although they are doing one thing with that scat package, which nobody else would do, which is offer that warranty. So, and there's various stages, scat 1, 2, 3. Scat 1 is basically some exhaust. Scat 2 is going to give you the tune. Scat 3 will get you into a camshaft. I believe all of that stuff was developed by Arrington, and this is some stuff from a while back. Just know that you're going to have to paper up pretty decent to get into that kind of power number. And by the way, the power number is about 50-ish horsepower to the crank over stock. So you're looking at about 420 to the crankshaft. And I'm going to stop right there and I'm going to say this, just because it always falls in line. You got to know what to compare the car to. A typical 5.7 will be lucky on a Mustang dyno. Keep in mind, I'm going to be giving Mustang dyno numbers. I'm not going to get into the dyno jet. You can add 8% or just pick a number. But since dynos vary so much, I don't even like saying if you take a Mustang dyno number and add 8% to it, that's your dyno jet. I've seen dynos all over the board. And if people aren't maintaining their dynos, then they don't read properly. It's just like any other tool. It's got to be calibrated. Yeah. Listen, I don't want to put all the CYA, but I got to, okay? So we're just going to talk about what I've personally seen on a calibrated Mustang dynamometer. 5.7s will be doing real good to put down 315, 320 to begin with. If you can get one of those things up around 360, 375 on a Mustang dyno, you're doing pretty good. So just know that coming into it. And by the way, most 392s, early 392s, so you can have something to compare this to, will put down somewhere in the range of 385 to 420. Now, the 385 was the early 2011 392. The later revised tune, revised operating system cars will put down around I've seen anywhere between 400 on the low side to 420 on the high side. So that'll get you right in that kind of that neck of the woods. And if it looks like I'm giving kind of a wide berth with the window of power, it's because I don't like quoting horsepower numbers. Again, go back to whatever verse I just got through rattling off about dynos being somewhat inconsistent, and you'll get the reasons why there pretty quickly. Especially if you're somebody that's in the performance industry, you get to talking about dyno numbers and that stuff gets inflated, conflated, and just absolutely people will sit around and get masturbated about whatever number comes out of that machine. And I'm just not, to me, it's just a tool. So I'm going to give you some power numbers that are ish, but it's really more about the driving experience than anything else. So let's dive into it. All the CYA out of the way, hopefully. So let's say you're up around 320. Here's a combination that works really well. So for cars, something around 220 on the intake side, somewhere around 226 to 228 on the exhaust side. Good NA cam. Lobe separation angle somewhere in the range of about 114. Be nice and streetable. Intake centerline somewhere around 108 to 109. Again, we're looking for a streetable cam that's going to work well with the stock intake manifold. From there, obviously, long tube headers and a 370 gear if you really want to be spicy. That combination to the rear wheels without the gear change, because gearing can affect dyno numbers. There's another CYA for you, but basically you're looking at something that's going to lay down somewhere around 365 to 375 to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno. That's with a car intake. Now, here come the questions. What about a 6.1 manifold? What about the Victor manifold? No. Excuse me, just 1 minute. No. So, it's late night, so we get some visitors sometimes around here. Hold, please. No, this is not. Dude, I can't help you. No. Huh? No, I'm not. All right, back to it. So, getting back to it, the combinations that work out are typically going to be centered around stock intake manifolds. The reason why they're going to be centered around stock intake manifolds is because that's what works best for that displacement with a rev range that's going to basically cap out around 6,500 RPM, something along the lines of a 6.1 or something along the lines of a Victor intake on a 5.7 is not going to do you any favors. As a matter of fact, it can do you more harm than good, especially when you start throwing camshafts into the mix. This is a topic that came up fairly recently, and eerily enough, it's something that in a way, I feel like I should have touched upon a little bit more than I have. The problem that we run into when we're putting cams together for 5.7s, things like that, is that you're up against an issue with a car that weighs a ton. And you're also up against an issue with a car that, well, needs to make a lot of torque coming out of the hole. So because of that, and because of the fact that, well, to be honest with you, they run like ass when you start trying to throw too much intake at them. They need the long runners. So if one were so inclined to run with a 6.1 type of an intake, or if one were so inclined to run with, say, for example, a Victor intake, something along those lines, basically a not stock intake. Obviously, the Sniper falls into this. What you're looking at is a car that's going to be lazy out of the hole. Hey, Roy, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Saying B, will an oil separator fit under a Challenger 392 shaker's scoop? No, it won't. Well, it kind of does. It'll fit in the same spot that they all fit, right there on the passenger side, right there up front. So, yeah, that's basically what you're looking at. Yeah, that's kind of the long and short of it, really. Fits in a normal spot, does its normal thing. Just if you decide to get one, I know billet technology is kind of the hot ticket. Just make sure you empty that thing once a month, at the most once a month. Don't do the whole oil change interval thing or anything like that. You're going to want to change that thing out at least once a month. And the reason why I say that is if you instill that as a habit, you'll be in pretty good shape. The problem that guys run into is that they forget about it. And you can imagine, like, if this Coke, hell no, this is Pepsi. if this Pepsi bottle is the catch can and it's getting close to the top, right? Because this is the catch can, just that flow of air through the system will start to drag and siphon that oil out of the can. And so you want to talk about creating a mess. It will turn what was kind of a mitigation. It'll turn what's basically a mitigation into a, basically a flood into your intake manifold. So, and the other thing about catch cans, guys, look, good point too, by the way, Roy, on the catch can question. Look, it is a mitigating thing. It is not a problem solving thing. Let me explain to you what I mean by that. The way that a catch can works is that you have a can, right? From the crankcase, air comes in, goes through what is known as a nucleation site, which is just on this side of the can, which is going to be your like steel wool, for example. Goes through the nucleation site, and then just because it's getting sucked out of here into the intake manifold. So you have this much, maybe, of that catch can that's being used as what's known as a nucleation site. And what that means, that's just a fart-smelling word that means that it takes the droplets out of the air charge and gives them something to run into. Pulls them out of suspension, turns them into droplets, and they fall into the can. That's the idea anyway. But you have to understand that, number one, they don't catch all of the atomized particles. So that still goes into the intake. Two, you got to think, this is a dynamic environment. You're going to have still some oil being dragged into that intake. And if you ask me by how much, I don't know, probably catching 20 to 30% of the vapors. Not a whole lot in the whole grand scheme of things. So when you think about it from that point of view, does a catch can really matter? Well, sorta. You're getting a lot of that vapor. You're getting the moisture out of that. As it goes away, it's going to dissipate as the car warms up. But you're getting moisture out of the air charge, or rather out of the crankcase, and still drawing some of that through the intake charge, but not by as much. But I got to tell you, this Pepsi bottle, and I've got a video on this. I hate it when YouTube guys do that. I've done a video on that before. Anyway, like, subscribe, and share. Hit the like button. Actually, that does make a difference, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Makes a big difference. YouTube metrics being what they are. So this little cap right here, this capful, is about, I think, the amount that I got out of 2 weeks, give or take. So it's not that much. And that's what I was getting in that catch can. Think about that for a minute. A lot of guys will go, well, yeah, but it didn't go into the intake. Well, yeah, sort of it didn't. But even though it didn't make it into the intake, at least that amount of it, given the amount of fuel that you burn, if I were to add that amount of oil to that amount of fuel that you burned, gallons of it on a daily, you'd never notice it. So is it a performance thing? Not really. And look, I port intake manifolds. That's what I do. And when I have had intake manifolds that have had catch cans on them, sometimes it's easy for me to call that they've had catch cans on them because they are soaked with oil. And because I know that they had a catch can on it because they never changed the oil in the catch can. And when they're super saturated like that, it means that they were actually drawing that oil in. Surprised it wasn't smoking on startup. So anyway, wanted to go ahead and touch on that portion of the combination chat. Catch cans, they work great. Thank you, Roy, for the question. Appreciate the super chat too. But are not at all necessary, mandatory, or anything like that. So what did we go over initially? Okay, so we went over combinations on 5.7s. Well, at least one combination. The big thing for 5.7s, honestly, is the exhaust. That suitcase exhaust that they have it's just an abomination for a performance car, and it's heavy to boot. but the brick manifolds are the thing that sting it the most. And this applies for the truck too, by the way. So an exhaust system will help those things immensely, significantly more than a 392 powered car or a Hellcat or anything like that. This is where the 5.7 actually kind of grows a little bit of cool, because if you've got a 5.7, you've got basically the Mopar equivalent of an LS, right? It doesn't have the cars anyway. They don't have variable intake runners or anything like that. They're just a regular intake with an adjustable cam, and that's about it. So there you have it. It's a good engine. And to be fair, it's actually really, really good. The only thing you've got to remember is that you do need to modify it for it to really perform. Here's one of the things that I've noticed too. When we would have the cars and the trucks on the dyno, even though the trucks had significantly heavier wheels and tires, or because the trucks had, in most cases, significantly heavier wheels and tires, the trucks would put down the exact same number that the cars would put down, that 320, give or take-ish number. So just know that it's not necessarily that the trucks make a lot more power. They do make more power, but when you see those numbers, most of the time it's because that truck's got a significantly heavier wheel and tire combination, which will affect dyno numbers. And in many cases, they are much more aggressively geared, but then the RPM per rev, in other words, RPM per mile per hour, is usually fairly close. So just know that even though they've got more aggressive gears, they've got taller tires, and that's how all that works out. That's something that does come up every once in a while. Slash is saying $5 towards a set of brass knuckles to whoever interrupts your live chat again at your door. Yeah, that's the first time that's happened. That was kind of weird. The guy thought that I was part of the building management or whatever that is here. And I'm going, dude, I don't know that building management has like race tires in the background and all this other stuff. But hey, I don't know. It's something that he probably didn't need. He needed to go to the bathroom, and I ain't letting somebody I don't know in my office. So, but so let's get back to, let's stick with the cars though, 5.7 stuff. So we've gone over exhaust. What exhaust do you get? So there are options for short, the short tube headers. Look, my thing is this: if you're going to go with shorties, don't go nuts spending money. Find somebody's SRT, in other words, 6.4 or Hellcat takeoffs, and grab that and run. You can typically get that stuff pretty cheap, and most race shops, I mean, a lot of the owners of that stuff don't even want to look at it anymore. They don't want to deal with selling it. They'll just leave it at the shop. So at one time, I had stock headers for a 6.4/Hellcat. I had that stuff just laying around. I was like, I don't even know what to do with this stuff. So I called the owners up. Hey, come get your shit. They're like, I don't want it. Sell it. Make some money off of it. I'm going, yeah, but then I got to sell it and make some money. They got to manage this sale. So anyway, the point of that, by the way, guys, is that you don't have to, how do I put this? You don't have to spend a ton of money to get a ton of performance out of that 5.7. And if you stick with the stock parts, then all you got to do is get stock hangers and you're in good shape. So again, stock manifolds with insert 6.4 exhaust behind it is a good, inexpensive way to pick up significant power. Obviously, tuning is going to come into play here, and you're going to want to tune the car to get the most out of it. It's designed to run on, for the most part, 89 octane. It'll get by on 87, but let's be real, they run better on 89, and you know it. So you can put a tune on it for 93 octane. I had actually optimized my truck for 89. It ran good. I mean, y'all seen my 0 to 60 runs and all of that kind of stuff. So, but that's a good starter pack for a 5.7. If you've got a 5.7 and you've got an 8-speed automatic, you're already way ahead of the curve in terms of performance. If you've got a Nag 1, it's still a good car. It's still a good setup. Don't let anybody tell you differently. The cool thing about a Nag 1 is when you put a 370 gear in a Nag 1, you have kind of this old school, cool driving experience. And I'm going to, by the way, guys, I'm going to leave torque converters out of this conversation. Most of you guys that I'm talking to, these are street cars. Yeah, there are some torque converters that are out there that work fairly well. The truck guys run some Circle D converters that have pretty significant flash rates on their converters. They drive kind of like stock, and then you stick your foot in them and they'll flash to 3,800 to 4,000 RPM. That can be a little bit disconcerting on the street. I would probably advise against it, just because once you tip into the throttle with a car with a converter, it flashes and it'll hang RPM, and it will make the car feel artificially slow. Like, it won't be slow, but it doesn't really have that snappiness that you're looking for. And the stock converter will flash up pretty good. By the way, I mean, you can stall that thing up to, I mean, hell, you can stall that thing probably 2,700 RPM. So there's that. But again, converters, you're not going to hear me really singing their praise too much for a street car, which is really what we're talking about. So we've talked about camshafts, kinda. The thing about the 5.7 is that obviously the exhaust has got to be swapped out before you can do anything with that car. Gearing can always be done. I always recommend the 370 gear for the 5.7. It just fits the torque curve and it fits the personality of that car really well. But once you start getting into camshafts, that's where things get a little bit dicey. Again, I recommend staying with the stock intake manifold. It's a long runner manifold that, in all honesty, will get you by with 99% of the stuff you're going to be doing. Now, if you do decide to go with like a Victor intake, or you decide to go with a 6.1 intake, you're going to want to have a cam that has a tighter lobe separation angle. The reason why you want a tighter lobe separation angle is to drag the power back, well, from your point of view, back towards the left-hand side of the dyno graph. What ends up happening is, let's see if I don't have one sitting here. What ends up happening is most Hemi camshafts, OTC, like over-the-counter camshafts, have a minimum of about 114 to 115 degree lobe separation angle. It means they're kind of a wide lobe separation angle. And the reason why they do that is because they're just keeping the intake runner side active. Nerd alert, this is going to get kind of technical. So if you get bored with technical stuff, now's a good time to go find you an adult beverage and a snack. So the reason why most aftermarket cam manufacturers will put them on a wider lobe separation angle, especially for the Mopars, is that the cylinder heads flow a boatload of air, but they do it in basically a sloppy way, in a way. That's one of the reasons why the runners are like this long, is to help to drive and stack that air on top of that intake valve. The tumble port is basically what they're known as. Any of the Hemi engines are like this. Not a lot of swirl, but they have a ton of air. It's like, opening up a manhole every time that intake valve opens up. So because of that, when you run a tight lobe separation angle with a lot of overlap, meaning the exhaust is open at the same time as the intake, you kill velocity, which means low speed throttle response kind of goes out the window. Partial tip-in throttle response, tip-in torque can go away at lower RPM levels. Now, you get all that back at higher RPM levels with low load. Say you're just like cruising at like 3,000 RPM or 3,500 RPM. That's when it gets real snappy with that tight lobe separation angle. But if you're driving this thing around on the street, that wide lobe separation angle is going to make it real easy to idle and cruise and do all of that. It's what you got to do with a Hemi just to make it act right. So if you decide that you want to go with an intake that has a shorter runner, then what you need to do is tighten up the lobe separation angle, tighten up the duration a little bit, and adjust where the intake center line is. So, the cam that I was illustrating before, 220 on the intake side, 228 on the exhaust side, 114. In this case, you would drop that down to about 112, 112 and a half, and you would actually want to advance that cam. Instead of an intake center line of say 109, you'd want to go to like 107. That will drag the power back down, build up a bunch of mid-range, which works perfectly for that intake manifold. And now you've got a matched kit, and that's what you're looking for. It's making sure that all the parts work in concert. Just like a concert, if one instrument is out of tune, it takes something that sounds beautiful and makes it sound like, I don't know, a dumpster full of freaking horny cats. I mean, you don't want to have any one part of your combination out of sync. So if you want to run a little bit more of a fancy intake manifold, you have to put the cam in it that will work with it. Otherwise, that lobe separation angle being so wide is going to want to drag power far out on the RPM band. The reason for that is you're opening up the exhaust valve early. You're dumping a lot of cylinder pressure to pick up pumping loss, well, to gain efficiencies with pumping loss on the big end. So hopefully technical time is over and everybody can get back to their normally scheduled watching. So there's that to consider. But aside from that, stock intake, get it cleaned up. I highly recommend cleaning up a manifold, primarily because I see enough of them and a lot of them are in pretty rough shape. You've got a lot of casting flash, a lot of funk in those runners. Always a good idea to, well, basically get that cleaned up. How much of a difference will it make? Well, it depends on how filthy those runners really are from the factory. If they've got a lot of casting flash, a lot of core shift, things like that, it can definitely help. Larger throttle body, not for a 5.7. You've got an 80 millimeter throttle body, more than enough for a 5.7 liter spinning up to 6,500 RPM. So there is your 5.7 combination in a nutshell. Now, that's all naturally aspirated. What about forced induction? Everybody love a little bit of boost. Okay, so, I mean, who doesn't love getting blown, right? So here's the thing. You got to remember, options are limited. You got ProCharger and you got the E-Force. I get it. Whipple's in there, Kenny Bell's in there, but they're not, all right? What you really have is you've got ProCharger if you want to try to make power on the big end of this thing, and you've got an E-Force kit if you just want to make power everywhere. Again, it depends on what you're up to with the car. If you've decided to go with a 370 gear and you want something that's going to be hell to pay on highway pulls, get you a ProCharger. If you want something that's going to be a riot all the time, doesn't matter what gears you've got in the thing, then the E-Force is going to be your e-ticket to have a ball with that car. Now, full disclosure on this, you will know where your money has been spent with that E-Force. The problem with the ProCharger is that, well, remember that little thing I was talking about earlier about fuel quality? All right, well, the good thing is that a ProCharger is going to be a little bit less susceptible to having issues with fuel quality because cylinder pressure isn't as high at peak torque as it is with a positive displacement supercharger that's always trying to cram boost into that engine. ProCharger, it's a raising boost curve, and it will actually help to put the power out there a little bit easier to have a top end rush as opposed to have an all the time rush is what I'm trying to get at. A little bit less susceptible to issues with fuel quality because of that, but, and this is the big but, you don't always feel the power of that ProCharger. I can't tell you how many ProCharge cars I've driven, talking about Hemis now, not like the Mustangs or anything else like that. For guys that are running street combinations making 7 pounds of boost-ish, you just don't ever feel it. And that's the problem. Because you don't ever actually feel it, is it really worth it? Because the biggest issue that you run into is, well, where'd your money get gone? And so I always default to the positive displacement supercharger. The reason why I do that is, number one, you know exactly where your money's been spent. And number two, and more to the point, it's a lot cleaner installation. So because it's such a much cleaner installation, you get power all the time. And no, you won't make the big halo number that you will with a ProCharger, but what you will get in return is power all the time that rivals the power out of the bigger brother in the 392. Torque on demand, just like the 392, roughly the same amount of power, maybe a little bit more, and it's a clean package all the way around. one of my personal all-time favorite cars to drive. And so because of that, I say that's the way that I would go with forced induction. Now, you might ask, what about turbos? Something along those lines. Forget about it. I'm not even going to get into turbos. Packaging can be a bit of a nightmare. And to be honest with you, the only kits that I've seen that I like the packaging of, you're talking a pretty significant cost. Let's just put it to you like that. So, not to mention they're just not quite vetted yet. And again, the eForce is a known value as well as the Pro Charger. So just something to consider there. So before I get into the 392 stuff, that's going to be a wrap for the 5.7s. By the way, for you guys that are considering running the 6.4 car intake on your LX platform 5.7s, great idea, but you will have to run a window switch. A lot of guys aren't really into that, but you are going to have to run a window switch. Set your window switch around 5,200, 5,400 RPM. Now, the truck guys, yeah, a little bit different story. They come with an intake that has short runner valves already. What you're going to want to look for there, though, is you're going to want to look for possibly a 6.4 truck manifold. And again, the same principles apply if you're going to clean it up. That's great. All I can tell you about that, though, is the trucks are a little bit different story and a little bit easier to make power with the trucks. Again, the computer already knows that it has a short runner valve intake, and that, by the way, is where the extra power is coming from. There's something to be said for the short runner valve intakes in that they do make better power up top with significantly, in some cases, better torque down low. So the 5.7 guys might be something that you want to look into, but it adds complexity. And like I was saying earlier, you've already kind of got you've got a simpler, more kind of a traditional hot rod coming into this. Yes, you can get more out of it with the intake. Absolutely not going to lie about that. But is it worth it? Depends on what you're doing with the car, but unless you're chasing a number, probably not. Throw a 370 gear in the thing and you'll forget all about that 6.4 manifold. So give me just a minute. See if I have to handle some business real quick, and I'll be right back. All right. Let me answer some of y'all's questions real quick. Make sure I'm not forgetting anybody. Again, if I end up not being able to get to you, I'm sorry, because I know this one is I'm gonna try not to have this one just drag on forever. Boots is saying, hey, B Mason, what's up, man? They already did that one. Quick break. Yep, there he is. Okay. Let's see. Got Smoking saying howdy. Anthony's got the thumbs up. Some Ferrari guy talking about his Mustang. Okay. Ashley, what's up? Ashley Mills in the house. The one and only turbo combination that I've seen that I actually like, by the way, is Ashley Mills' car. David saying, hey, from Ontario. What's up, Ontario? David, I like it. Eric saying, good evening, Professor Mason. Got the arm flex. I like it. Smoking 05 likes VP. VP, some good stuff. Owen's asking, how much would you gain by putting skinnies on the front over a stock tire? On a car that's running mid-10s, you'll pick up half a tenth. Shawnee's saying, how come octane boost instead of adding a couple of gallons of 100 octanes? Because 100 octane is hell expensive, and I use 100 octane cans as as trash cans because they're expensive. No, that's the reason why. I mean, instead of getting, a can of this, which is going to cost me $8, I can put 3 ounces of Boostane, which seems to work just fine. A lot of guys, I was pretty on the fence about Boostane, but here's the thing: I'm not changing my tune. I'm actually just cheap insurance, if you will. So, but yeah, and I don't want it to be a permanent thing. It's just right now, it's got to get me through the fact that we've got some bad fuel quality right now. So that's the main reason for that. Oh, Smoking 05 saying, great topic about which combinations work. I'm sitting here comparing a 17 392 stock tune to a 19 stock tune. There are a lot of small differences in the engine tune, but significant differences in the trans tune. Yeah, there is. Take a look at the cam. Let's see, you're using a 19. Take a look at the cam phasing. It might be surprised. There are some differences in there. But yeah, there's a lot of little differences for sure. And it's one of the reasons why the newer cars run so much better than the older ones do. It's all about that operating system. And we've been able to prove that on several different occasions. We've seen where the 19 cars on a drag pack with a little bit of weight reduction, or at least race prep, is in good air, an 1160, 1170 car, whereas it used to have a tune to get to those numbers. You don't anymore. Let's see. Oh, Captain Scott's checking in with everybody. Boosting is saying, Boostain is good stuff. Yeah, it is. Oh, damn. Word to the wise. And I didn't bring it with me. I wasn't even thinking about this. Use glass or stainless steel whenever you're transferring the Boostain into your tank if you're measuring these things out at first. Do not use a plastic measuring device. If you use a plastic measuring device, the Boostain will turn the plastic measuring device into jelly. So just don't do that. Pro tip. Ask me how I know. And you can go online. You can get the little shot glass. Just go to like a bar, like a bar tending, like bar stuff. You know. Anyway, you're gonna get the little measuring jiggers, and if you want to do that, just basically pour 2 shots into your tank. It's basically 3.4 ounces, and that'll put you right at like 98, right at 98 octane. So another life hack if you're using Boostain. Let's see. Oh, Sean saying that his 57300C really liked a canned tune. A lot of them do. Smoking 05. Some of the earlier canned tunes, by the way, were pretty hot. I had to tone a couple of those down. Smoking 05 saying, I had Pikes tuned my 17 392 and I'm happy with it. Do you think it's worth it to swap the base 2019 tune and have Pikes retune it off of that base? Not really. Alex is we'll have made quite a bit of changes in that tune, so I don't really think so. 17 is actually a pretty solid operating system too. The 16s are a little soft, and the 15s might be a little bit soft. My car made the least amount of power. Here's the funny thing. My car, Shalandra, made the least amount of power out of all the tuned 392s. And it was consistently the quickest out of all of them. So at least it was as of a few years ago. So anyway, that's always kind of a fun bit of history. Hey, Modern Red saying he just hit the 10-second club with his ProCharge 5.7 10.9 at 126. Very nice. I like it. That's a combination that works really, really well. So let's talk about the 392s. On the footnote of the ProCharge 5.7 going 10s, it is not uncommon to not see many 392s go 10s. And the reason for that is if you bought a 392, you bought a 392 because you did not want to modify a 5.7. In fact, you've chosen to do quite the opposite. You've chosen to have something from the factory with a warranty that you can basically hop into, fire it up, and go play without having a looming potential issue of warranty over your head, which is great. Listen, that's one of the reasons why I originally bought a 392. I didn't really feel like messing with a 5.7. My truck was a 5.7, and it's actually what got me into the 392s. So it was really because of that truck that I got into the 392s. But that being said, when you start to look at what the 392 is, well, equipped with from the factory, it doesn't leave a lot of meat on the bone. Let me give you some examples. Remember when I was telling you about using the 6.4 or the Hellcat exhaust on a 5.7? It's a good inexpensive, if you want to call, that amount of money inexpensive, say around $750 for the kit. It's an inexpensive, significant increase in power that you'll get. Well, obviously tuning with it helps a whole lot more. Here's the funny thing. The 392 already comes with, obviously, those parts. They're high performance parts. The 392 has a very wide lobe separation angle on its cam, so long tubes don't really help it the way that you may have them help you in a 5.7. With that very wide lobe separation angle, there's just not a lot of overlap, and you need overlap to make long tube headers work. The faster you spin an engine with a cam with a wide lobe separation angle, the less actual scavenging that you can get. This is, comparative to RPM, in other words. So when you put long tubes on a 392, you will pick up torque and you will pick up some drivability. Score. But you may actually, believe it or not, lose just a little bit of horsepower at the very tippy tip top of the RPM range. It's not uncommon to see one go from, say, 420 horse to 418 horse, but pick up 5 or 7 foot-pounds of torque for most of the RPM range. Now, what you won't notice on the dyno chart is just that tip-in throttle response that does get better with long tubes. So do I recommend them? Yes. Long tubes, metal substrate catalytic converters, good upgrade for a 392, but please don't expect anything out of it. The reason why I say don't expect anything in terms of performance or anything like that is I just haven't seen long tubes give an ET or a quarter mile advantage over the stock system, but drivability gets better. It just is a smoother running car with that type of a kit. So yes, go with the long tube headers. Even though they don't make any horsepower, they will give you some torque and some drivability that you will certainly appreciate. But you've got to have an unlocked PCM and a tune to get the most out of them. If you don't have the ability to tune for them, you're going to run into a problem. They are going to freak out your knock sensors. And so what can end up happening is if you don't have a tune that is accommodating to the long tube headers in terms of knock sensor sensitivity, the knock sensors will go into freak out mode. And what will then end up happening is you'll have a situation on your hands where you're pulling a ton of timing, which means you're losing a ton of power. You'll wonder, why does the car feel sluggish when you get onto it? Why does it feel like it just goes flat? The sound will be flat at that point. It's something you can actually feel, but you can actually hear this happen too. And it's because the tune is not accommodating to the long tube headers. So if you are choosing to go with long tube headers for any of these combinations, truck, car, van, school bus, airplane, boat, spaceship, whatever it is, you've got to have the tune set up for the long tube headers. If not, you will actually lose significant amount of power and you will be pissed until that thing is tuned to run right. So what after that? Well, intake manifold porting and throttle bodies. So yeah, it can help. If you've got an intake with a lot of casting flash, it can certainly help. And y'all know my point on porting manifolds. To me, it's more blueprinting than anything else. Each manifold's a little bit different, perfectly honest with you. Some get more benefit from cleanups, which it really is. I wouldn't really call it porting. It's really a significant cleanup because you simply just can't get all the way around. You're not extrude honing, okay? It's a cleanup. You get into throttle bodies. I've actually got the one that I use as a template right here. So this is an 85 millimeter throttle body. The 5.7 and the 6.4 both come with the same throttle body. So where the 5.7 doesn't really pick up too much with the throttle body, the 6.4 can pick up a little bit. So just know that coming into it. But to work properly, you cannot, I repeat, you cannot just take this throttle body and bolt it to your 6.4 and have it work at all, basically. It does have to be open. The opening, the actual opening size is about 82 to 83 millimeters, but the problem is that it actually necks down to about 78 millimeters. In some cases, that intake is really only right at 80 millimeters, 81 at the most, and for some build dates. I want to say there's some build dates in like 2015, 16, and 17, maybe. They were a little bit smaller. So again, unless that opening is opened up, you're not going to get anything from just sticking a throttle body on there. So word to the wise. Hopefully that saves you some cash. Now, if you want to go with a different intake manifold, you know, we're talking about the Victor before, and I had mentioned the 6.1 and the Sniper intake manifolds. So each one of the aftermarket intake manifolds, and by the way, this is why there aren't any FAST manifolds or anything like that for the 6.4. Any of those aftermarket intake manifolds lose a significant amount of torque down low. Just how it is. I don't have a lot of experience with the Victor manifold on a stock 392. Or a cam 392 for that matter, because the stock manifold does such an amazing job building in good drivability. Because it has such strong drivability features, you can have your cake and kind of eat it too with that manifold. The 6.1 manifold is kind of an interesting thing. There's actually a little bit of story with the 6.4 with the 6.1 manifold. When the 6.4 was being hatched, it did not have a variable runner intake manifold. It had a modified version of the 6.1 manifold, and it made more horsepower with that manifold. It made about 500 horsepower, but it was terrible down low. And so the development that went into the manifold that the 6.4s have now was to get a much higher average power output out of that engine. Now, if you were to take the 6.1 manifold, or kind of by rights, the Edelbrock manifold, and have them extrude honed, larger throttle body, either an 85 or a Hellcat throttle body at 92, you'd have yourself a very capable intake manifold, and it would work really well in that respect, but it would be limited in its scope. It would be a little bit more peaky, a little bit more power through the mid-range and maybe through the upper mid-range, may equal the long runner stock manifold up top. That's just kind of what I've seen. So in general, I typically don't recommend those manifolds unless you're going with a significant stroker combination, which we're kind of going to fall into here in just a minute. And by the way, if you noticed, I didn't mention anything about stroker setups for 5.7s. No, bad 5.7 owner. Well, let's go ahead and get into it. I mean, we've gone over the exhaust. There's really nothing else to do to the car. Tuning is kind of it's already kind of part of what you're going to do, right? Manifold, porting, blueprinting, cleanup, larger throttle body, definitely good. A lot of folks like that. Oh, yeah, cheapest, easiest thing to get, Hellcat airbox with a Hellcat filter. If you're a Challenger, it's going to go together pretty easily. If you're a Charger, one of the earlier Chargers, you got to pull the front end of the car off to get them to work. I think the later ones, it's a lot easier to incorporate that kit. Just do that. That's going to be part of what makes that car work really well. And for anybody that's wondering about cold air kits for these cars and if they pick up any power or anything like that, look, kind of hard to replicate what goes on when you're driving when you're on a dyno. And again, remember from the first part of this chat, I said I'm not going to get into dyno numbers per se, but I will tell you this. At the drag strip, the Hellcat kit works better than any other kit that I've tested. I have tested, oh God, I've got videos up. Remember, I can't stand that, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay, so I've got videos of different intakes that I've tested. Mopar cold air kit, didn't even bother taking it to the track. The ambient temperatures were through the roof. Leg Maker did really well all the way around. That's the true cold air kit. Hellcat Airbox, Hellcat filter did the absolute best out of all of them, both in mitigating heat and just in the ETs that I was getting out of that thing. From there, you've got the typical just regular tube with a conical filter. They look kind of neat. It looks a little bit old school, but they typically perform the worst until you get rolling, and then you evacuate the under hood portion of that car of all the hot air and all the fan wash, which is kind of a big issue. And then they start working pretty good, once you get the hot air blown out from in front of that filter. So what's the verdict on all of that? If you like the noise of the intake, just go with it. It doesn't matter. It's part of the theater. It's part of the show of the package. Anyway, they work just fine at the drag strip for the most part. However, if you're chasing a number, just know that if you've got a lot of hot air sitting there, your fans are kicking on, they're blowing all the radiator wash right around that filter. When you go to shower down on that throttle, you are sucking in some hot ass air. We're talking dry sauna temperature style air for about, 3-4 seconds of the pass before everything clears out. Can make a difference with your 60 foot. So I'll give back what it says on a dyno. I can make a dyno read however you want me to read. I can put fans around the filters. I can do all kinds of things to get a quote unquote result. But so far as I can tell, there hasn't been one manufacturer's claim that has come anywhere near the truth when it comes to cold airs. So, and that's going to apply for all the cars that we're talking about. Keep in mind, I do a ton of testing. In fact, since we're on the subject of cold air kits, and I don't like to get ahead of myself, but with Revlon, what we did is, I did the live show, and in live and in person, ran the car with no air filter in it, or ran the car with the filter, took the filter out, and that's where the video starts. Ran the car with no air filter, data logging it, put the stock filter back in, data log it again, and KPA, which is to say boost, actually went up. So the car was doing better with the filter in the car. By the way, that car has gone a 10.12 at 136, because I'm not going to claim 138 that the time slip said. I think it's a little bit optimistic. But enough of that. It just went a 1015 at 134.82. Let's see, backed up by a bunch of 1019s. Here's a 1018 that it ran. And of course, y'all have seen the 1017. If you've been by the channel, that's kind of the intro video or whatever you want to call it there. Anyway, that's all done with the stock filter in place. And that is 93 octane with no butane, no Torco, no race gas mix whatsoever. So there's that. And now, granted, that's a supercharged application, but it gives you an idea as far as actual airflow demand. It doesn't, in fact, it's better to have the filter in that air box than it is to not have it in there at all. Surprising result, by the way, because I would have lost my ass if I'd have put money on that. So we all learn as we go. But there's your parts list for not only the 5.7, but for the 6.4 and for the Hellcat in general. Steer clear of some of the hype. If you buy a cold air kit because you like the way it looks, cool. If you like the way it sounds, very cool. But don't buy it because somebody's telling you that your car is going to go faster. Ain't gonna happen. I've got way too many. I have got miles and miles worth of testing on a drag strip and on the mean streets of Velocito when I'm out doing the data logging and product testing out there. I can tell you that it just did not matter. And I had gone back to back to back testing one night with air intakes. And by the time it was all said and done, I wanted to jump off a cliff. and here's the other thing. So talking about filters, by the way, that trend stayed live with the green filter. Now, for those of y'all that aren't familiar with green filter, I did a video on that too. So anyway, you can see through it, and it's terrible at filtration, but it flows its ass off, and that was actually its undoing. And somewhere around here, anyway, I've got the green filter and the cleaning kit that I just haven't thrown away yet. Strangely enough, the results were identical with the green filter as they were with running no filter whatsoever, meaning that it lost boost. It just, even, and by the way, you can say, well, because of the delta of the this and the that save all your theories, the timestamp from 60 to 130 was shorter with the stock filter than it was without any filter, or with the green filter. So timestamp is just like having a dyno. Now, the intakes thing, stick with the 6.4. Now, camshafts. Here's where things get real dicey with 6.4, guys. The cams that are out there, the reason why a lot of guys have a bad taste in their mouth with cams for 6.4s is that so many of them were such dogs to drive back in the day. And a lot of guys, tuners, don't speak fluent Mopar. That's a significant part of this conversation, by the way. And I'm just going to stop right here, and I'm going to tell you, you have got to be working with a tuner that speaks fluent Mopar. Not one that just knows how to tune, not somebody that simply has some tuning software. No. You've got to be dealing with somebody that speaks fluent Mopar, because things are a little bit different with these cars. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can not hurt the car, not hurt the engine, although I guess you could. If you try to throw too much timing at it, which is something that used to happen quite a bit, tuners would see these low timing values and they go, I don't think that have any timing in it, and throw 10 degrees of timing at them and start breaking things. That's actually where the 392 got a reputation of the pistons being made out of glass. It's because they were getting the piss rattled out of them because they were so over-timed. They all break. I mean, over time, anything, it's going to potentially hurt something. So anyway, just so you know. Slash, thank you very much. Got the bald guy with the shades. Thank you, brother. And then Rift saying, what do you think about the JLT intake if you were to get one? And thank you for the super chat. Actually, you know what? I like the JLT. The reason why I like the JLT is, number one, it looks cool. All right. I like the look of the thing. Of all of the open element filter setups that are out there, JLT is probably my number one pick. Number two would be the cheapest, well, I wouldn't say cheapest. Number two would be the leg maker, only because it looks really cool too. They don't really make a ton of power at all. They don't make any power really. Depending on your power level, your car, let's see, your car might get a little something out of it, but it's not going to get a ton. Give you an idea, Robert Eaton's car, a known multiple 9-second offender. That car didn't really pick anything up with the JLT. He went back to his stock setup and it's running 970s with a 285. And that's in kind of air. But just the theater of having that intake on a Hellcat, it sounds really good. And it sounds really good on an NA car too. So again, you know, do I recommend it? Well, I'm coming at this from a numbers point of view. I'm coming at that from a, is it faster point of view? What did I get for my money in terms of actual power production? And from that point of view, I'm with it. But from a tonight. But from an actual theater point of view, from the point of view where you're going to have the ability to know where your money's been spent because you can hear the engine, because you can hear that thing working, I would say that it's worth it at that point. So yeah, spend your money. I think it'd be worth it to get for you. Let's see, what do we got here? Oh, hang on. See, one of my cams being brought up. Quick Brick is saying, I don't know what Smoking a 5 had asked, but yeah, the CDO1 cam ramp rates are too aggressive for the crap MDS lifters. Yeah, for sure. You have to. So, and that's the other thing. When we're talking about camshafts, one of the things you're going to have to do is you have to think about it as an entire assembly, an entire kit. So, you know, we've talked about camshafts for the 5.7 and 6.4. What we've got to then really discuss is going to be, well, what kind of kit are you looking for? Well, first of all, I don't like no spring required camshafts. I don't feel like there is such a thing as an NSR cam. One thing I will say is I will say that the right cam with the right springs, with the right push rod, is going to give you an altogether brand new driving experience with that car. But it's got to have the right springs, and it has to have upgraded springs, because those valves, and I just don't have a Hemi intake valve sitting here. It's like a 214 valve. They're huge. They're about that big around. And you've got to have a lot of spring to be able to control that valve, just in general. So when you're talking about much more aggressive ramp rates with the camshaft, higher duration numbers, which doesn't really matter, it's the ramp rate and how fast it gets to those higher lift and longer duration numbers, you've got to have a spring that can manage that. Because the last thing you want is to have a cam in there that is aggressive by nature, but yet it falls on its face at 6,200 RPM because it loses all sense of valve control. So again, I don't believe in no spring required camshafts, and you're going to have to look at it from the point of view of it is an entire assembly when you get a new cam. And to that point, the heads have got to come off the car anyway. So if the heads are coming off the car, you might as well put the springs in it while the heads are off. So, and of course, lifters, Hellcat lifters. That's all you need. We're running so many camshaft kits out there with the Hellcat lifters with all kinds of crazy power. We got over 1,000 horsepower to the rear wheels cars, close to 1,000 horsepower to the rear wheels cars out there. All of those are running Hellcat lifters. So just something to think about there. Hellcat lifters, 080 push rods, PSI 15, 16 springs. I like the higher the higher spring pressures. And, you know, the cam that you decide to go with, that's a solid combination that will be durable, and it's also going to be the right choice for you for a long-term project. Again, you can beat up the stock springs. They might work for a little bit, but I would never run them with an aftermarket camshaft. Not ever. Let's see. Captain Scat goes, I had the worst 5.7 intake manifold ever before the professor got a hold of it. 6-hour porting record. Dude, that one was murder. So here's the funny thing. That intake, I swear, that was one of the ones that, so if you've never seen a 5.7 intake, if I could cut one in half for you, the interesting thing about it is that they have kind of an air horn inside of them, and I'm exaggerating the shape of it. Hold on. We're not using that. Boy, I screwed that one all all the hell. All right, so aside from where the actual ports are, this is just for illustrative purposes only. You've got to imagine that this tube is elevated like the second story of a house, okay? And if the front of this thing is where the throttle body bolts to it, and again, this is, God damn, that's awful. Anyway, that'll give you an idea. It actually necks down, and this is exposed to a whole bottom plenum, and then these runners feed off the bottom plenum and feed the other side of it. Dude, your intake, I've had a couple of them like this. The actual opening was just tiny and it dropped down. It was weird. It was like a different casting altogether. So that had to be significantly reworked. But yeah, that one was a nightmare. I had so much material taken out of that intake. And a lot of times, guys, for whatever reason, guys want to see, hey, show me how much crap comes out of the intake. And it's typically, I mean, it's enough to easily fill the inside of this throttle body. In fact, that would probably be about the amount. I mean, I take a lot of material out of those intakes. That one was probably about 20% more than that. Let's see. And this is the post that Quick Brick was talking about. And again, guys, I'm sorry if I don't get to your question. It's just I'm trying to hit these points and stay on topic. So we've touched on intake manifolds for the 6.4. We've touched a little bit on camshafts. So let's talk about camshafts. Again, same issue that you run into when you're talking about a 5.7. You only have this tumble port style cylinder head to work with. It flows a ton of air. And guys, what you don't understand about the Hemi, and this is what blows a lot of people's minds that look at the Gen 3 Hemi from a little bit different point of view. The Gen 3 Hemi cylinder head flows as much as a very hot aluminum head for a big block Chevy. They flow 330 to 340 CFM, which is unheard of by hot rodder standards of a certain era. Okay, I mean, you're talking about guys that had cylinder heads that would be doing well to flow 240 CFM. By the way, a set of 6.1 heads, I think, flows 280, 260, something like that. So really good heads, but not by modern crazy flow number standards. So when you take that into account, it blows my mind. And so anyway, going with a big lumpy cam will literally only exacerbate the issue with that tumble port design. Again, it's one of the reasons why that 6.4 intake has runners that are this freaking long. It's to help generate not only velocity, but to accentuate that stacking effect to try to bring power down. That head is trying to make power at 7,500 RPM or higher. And so it's the intake trying to chill everything out and drag that power back down. Hence, where you're at with that particular intake. Tighten up the intake center line, things work really well with that intake. Manifold KPA is not uncommon to be in the ambient zone for a very long amount of time. Even so far as to be out to 62, 6,400 RPM and still be very close to ambient conditions, which is to say that the pressure inside the intake manifold in terms of atmospheric pressure is basically the same as what it is just out here in the regular world. To give you an example, a carburetor will always have some amount of vacuum in it. And back in the day, a race carburetor manifold, you might be looking at 1/2 inch of mercury because they rated everything in inches of mercury back then, as opposed to KPA, which is just a little bit more of an easy way to think of things because it's a 100 base. In other words, 100 kPa is normal atmospheric pressure. So they would rate those in, 5 inches would be like, wow, that's just too race. You'll never be able to make that work on the street. Well, the stock manifold with a cam that's been opened up can achieve better than that race carbureted style of vacuum inside that plenum. Now, it still doesn't matter. It doesn't mean the thing's going to rev to the moon. You still have these crazy long runners that are going to do what crazy long runners do, which is stack air, build velocity, and make a situation where it's going to want to make peak power significantly lower. So what do you do with a 6.4? Well, for one thing, you tighten up that lobe separation angle significantly. 121 ain't ever going to make it. As a matter of fact, 121, the cam that's in the 6.4 would actually make for a really good positive displacement supercharger cam. Just kind of a word to the wise for you 5'7" guys that are out there. If you're thinking about going with a positive displacement setup and you're thinking about going with a PD blower and you want to go with a good cam for your combination, get you a 6.4 cam. You'll thank me for it. That thing will have great boost response and it'll make good power up to about 6,200 RPM with that camshaft. Again, that wide lobe separation angle, making that intake runner or intake valve, at least the face of it, what it sees, will be very active. Now, tighten that up, give yourself some overlap, throw some long tubes on it, and you can pick up a decent amount of power. Anywhere from 30 to 50 horsepower to the rear wheels is about what you're going to be seeing. It depends on the combination, what you're starting out, if you're starting out with a tuned car versus a bone stock car, etc. But with a cam, long tubes, like quick brakes combination, E85, etc., you can pick up an honest 100 horsepower with that combination and have a car that will run easy mid 11s at, 4,600 plus pounds. You put that in a much lighter Challenger and you're probably looking at somewhere in the range of, high tens pretty easily for one of those types of setups. And if you do it right with like a CD01 grind or a sniper grind or something along those lines, you're not going to lose any real drivability, especially if you're running the stock intake manifold. It makes the car a lot of fun to drive and will definitely keep those pesky 5.0s at bay. Now, that being said, it is a costly endeavor to find yourself in the middle of. And this is why you don't see too many cam 6.4 liter cars. Unless you have one that you've had for a while, or you've been willed one, or you've been given one, or whatever the case is, to put the cam and all the requisite other miscellaneousness onto that vehicle to make it work the way that you want it to work is going to cost a significant amount of money, and it starts to encroach upon that Hellcat money. Now, that's a bit of a problem because, well, to be honest with you, you've got to be in love with an NA combination to go that far with a 6.4, and a lot of folks are. And they enjoy it. They enjoy the theater of it. They either want a cam that's going to be lumpy, they want to be able to handle their own on the street, they want to have just an enhanced driving experience, then that's the route that they're going to go. They're going to go with that cam scenario, and they're not worried about chasing a number necessarily. In other words, they're not out to get a Hellcat. They've weighed the options and have chosen against it. There are some options, by the way, that I sometimes wish I would have taken, but I love Revlon, so we're going to keep her. But that being said, it is a rather expensive proposition. And because it's an expensive proposition, a lot of guys will forego that and just go straight to the Hellcat. So when you're contemplating going that route, just remember that if you are looking to go significantly faster, you may be better off going with the Hellcat if you want, say, a solid 10-second car. But if you want a very fun NA car, well, then that 6.4 with a cam is going to be right up your alley. Now, as far as gearing and doing anything else like that is concerned, I probably wouldn't really worry too much about that because, well, the car makes a lot of torque anyway. Some guys have gone with 370 gears with the 392. The word back is that it's a little bit skatey, at least on the street. Now, at the drag strip, a little bit different story, but you're going to need some significant trans tuning to get that to work just right. There's going to be some rev limit things that you're going to change that are going to, well, to put it mildly, you're going to have to do a lot of finagling to get that thing to work right. So just know that coming into it. But once you get that sorted out, you'll be in pretty good shape. The other thing about messing around with the 392s that always comes up is the question of boost. So here's the thing. Yes, 392 does well with boost. Pro chargers are very popular. The other very popular way to go about things is, again, with the E4 supercharger kit. But I got to warn you, one of the areas that you're going to find as a weak link pretty quickly, well, it's going to be that transmission. And the transmission issue is the big issue here. You've got to look at it from the point of view that the transmission was designed to just manage what that 6.4 liter will put out. I am still a little bit bewildered as to why that car never got an HP 90. It would almost be, it's like the perfect transmission for a 392, but alas, they didn't go that route. So because they didn't go that route, we're stuck with what we've got. And that is going to be one of the first weak links that you'll find. So what'll they take? Well, they'll take about 530 foot-pounds of torque to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno. But that's on a strapped down scenario. On the street, you can probably get away with more, provided you're not running a real sticky tire on the street all the time. But if you do, and you're taking the thing to the drag strip, just know that that transmission is probably going to be on borrowed time at that point. So let's see. Let me answer some questions here. Oh, and the whole thing about by the way, the whole thing about 392s having glass pistons, not necessarily. The problem is always ring gap. And where guys really get it wrong is they want to just be able to take a supercharger, bolt it right onto that engine and send it. Doesn't really work like that. The reason why it doesn't work like that is because, number one, the 392 has got basically 11-to-1 compression. And since it's got 11-to-1 compression, cylinder temperatures are going to be very hot. They're going to cause that top ring land, or the ring and the land, to expand much more quickly. Yes, the ring land is fairly shallow in the piston. However, when it's tuned properly, you'll probably be just fine. But again, I would still err on the side of caution, stick around that 7 to 8 pounds of boost right in there. That'll be the happy spot. Whoa, quick break. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Saying the car would not do what it does without your guidance, my friend. Could not be happier with the way she drives and performs. Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate that very much, man. Appreciate the super chat. I tell you what, well, give me a shout this week so we can knock out that, some of that just, playing around drivability portion of it. And while we're doing that, obviously you'll be able to see what I'm up to, and we're just going to be playing with some percentages. So, I guess a homework assignment for you is to just take a look at where it's shifting right now. Just kind of bring your notepad along with you and, just jot down, okay, at just whatever you feel like is the normal driving around throttle, just jot down what it's shifting at. And that way I can kind of get an idea for what you're looking for. And in that range, basically, of what you're looking for there. But thank you very much, brother. I appreciate that a bunch, man. Thank you very much. Man, I really do appreciate it, buddy. Thank you. But anyway, getting back to, man, it kind of threw me off. Thank you, brother. So when we're looking at what works for a 392, just remember that we're still talking about a total system here, just like we were talking about for the 5.7. It is a total systems approach. And when you look at it from that point of view, again, you'll have the understanding that everything has to work in concert. So if you did get a manifold, intake manifold, that is not going to work in concert with the type of cam that you have, the type of exhaust that you have. Everything all has to work in concert. Long tube, same thing. You have to have a tune to make it work. And it will only work in kind of a specific RPM range. And again, a lot of guys, they're kind of old school and they don't have the, they just don't have the knowledge of what these modern cars are all about or how they're built with these crazy flowing heads and these camshafts that are basically suited, well, better suited for, positive displacement superchargers with these crazy wide lobe separation angles. And all of that is done in an effort to keep those RPM down and to make them snappy to drive. And again, the 392 does that better than any other engine I've ever driven. 392 is incredibly snappy underfoot. But just because it's snappy underfoot, or the reason why it's snappy underfoot and what makes it snappy underfoot also gives it that driving personality that once you start messing with camshafts, you can kind of ruin it a little bit. And this is where 392s and 5.7s really diverge. What ends up happening is you have 5.7 guy is typically all right with losing some down low drivability or whatever. 5.7 guy is probably going to put a gear in it anyway. And it's not like 5.7 guy is starting from a really high point. I mean, it's there, but it's not with down bottom end torque. The 392, on the other hand, that is what it does best. It's its bread and butter. And so when you start looking at the bottom of the page, as they say, and you start trying to put too much camshaft into one of those things, what ends up happening is that you kill that bottom end. And this is where you got to be very, very, very careful with the 392. Don't put too much cam in it. Don't worry about what the dyno says, because if you choose to go that route and you ruin bottom end torque, the car is going to feel slower just driving it around in general. So just know that coming into it. Definitely something to watch out for. Pitch Black, thank you very much. Asking, probably asked already, 17x10 wells with shorter end lengths tire choices, 2019 Charger Scat Pack daily and drag night only. Thank you. So 17x10, you're going to go with a 305, 45, 17. That's the size tire you're going to go with. Now, as far as what tires do you like? Well, let's see. We're talking about a 2019 Charger Scat Pack. If you're going to be running two different pairs of those wheels, your daily tire can be pretty much anything that's in that size range. The ET Street SS is what most guys will go with for a street and strip combination for a Scat Pack. That tire works really well in that. ET Street R is a fantastic tire that works really well as a very dry weather tire and track day tire, but you do not ever want to get caught in the wet with those. From there, let's see. There may be some Nitto options out there, but I would probably say that I would stick with those Mickey Thompson options. Now, they may have a, what is it? It's a, oh, what is it? What the hell's the name of it? Anyway, it's their street tire brand, whatever the brand is of it. Anyway, it's under their street tire brand, and it's more of a regular tire. That might work well for you for a daily setup if you're only looking to have two different sets of wheels and tires. If you only want to have one, Mickey Thompson ET Street SS is a good place to go, but I'm going to warn you on this. Those tires are no picnic in the wet either. So you're going to want to just be aware of that. If it rains, probably not the best wheel and tire setup for you. Stick with stock for daily. You can always tear those up and throw a set of Turo AZ850s on there and be in great shape. But for the most part, to get the most out of your car at the drag strip, the ET Street R is going to be best. And what most guys do is they'll have a set of 17 by 10s on tap. They'll have those for the track and for, you know, certain trips to Mexico. And then they'll have their normal regular street setup, something along the lines of an Turo AZ850 or something like that. So just something to consider. Silver Knight saying, hit that like button. Thanks, man. Again, thank you very much, Quick. I appreciate that, brother. So next on the list, last but not least, the Hellcat family. Subject I dearly love. So here's the thing. It's hard for me to, with a good conscience, give you a pulley ratio that I would recommend for the street. And let me tell you the reason why. First and foremost, the Hellcat stock tune is a pretty hot tune from the factory. And it's lean, like significantly lean. So, oh, and by the way, the same principles apply for the Hellcat that applied downstream. So cold air intake, same thing. Do it for the theater if you like it. If not, stick with the stock stuff with the stock filter. It works the best. Secondly, catless or high flow cats, whatever you want to do, you can go with. Metal substrate's the only way to go. Just don't go catless. We've actually done testing back to back and have found that catless, well, didn't really do as well as the factory catalytic converters did at the track. So there's that. And again, keep in mind, there are demon after demon and pulleyed car after pulleyed car in the nines with factory catalytic converters. So guys, there's no reason to pull the cats off the car. There's really not. And here's the funny thing. They're pretty loud with the factory catalytic converters in. So if you're doing it for a noise thing, okay, maybe. But the reality is that those things are going to be pretty loud. So I would leave it at that. Leave those things on there. So Hellcat, pulleys, what works? Nothing works. At least not with 93 octane. So the tune on Revlon is significantly richer than factory. In fact, it's almost a full point richer than factory, about 11.8 versus a 12.7. My timing values in the tune are there to accommodate the shift points and to also give the timing or give the car a little bit of a cushion with that timing when it shifts in really deep DA. And what I was noticing was in really deep DA, the car would lay over a little bit, almost like it ran out of timing, and then it would pick back up on the shift. Added a couple of degrees of timing, and it did great in that one spot, but the rest of the tune is practically stock timing. There might be a degree in there here and there, but I will tell you that my entire 6,000 RPM column is bone stock. So that'll tell you how much I've actually played with. And with that in mind, that fueling in mind, and with those timing values in mind, I was still getting significant knock retard out of it. And this is with knock sensors that have been massaged pretty well. So it's a fuel quality issue at this point. So the question then is, okay, well, what about a Ripatune lower pulley? Well, let's talk about that. Because if I were to have had one of those pulleys on the car with the crap fuel that I had, that I ran into, with no boostane or, race gas mix or anything like that, that could have, in essence, led me to have even a bigger problem with short-term knock retard. which would have been a whole, could have been another series of problems. And that knock could have been real knock at that point. So even at what is more or less considered a stock timing value, you're still going to run into problems with that particular setup with the Hellcat from time to time. So what do you do about it? Well, if it's a stock car, just throw a 309 gear in it and a pedal commander. Now, this is the first time I brought up pedal commander in this whole chat. And the reason for that is because for the other cars, yeah, it might make a little sense to do it, but you're going to put a tune on the car anyway. For the Hellcat, it's a little bit different story. And this can also play into the Red Eyes and the Demons and the Super Stocks and all the rest of the whatevers that come with that, right? What you're going to find is if you want to keep warranty, you can probably get away with a 309 gear. We're talking Hellcats here. The pedal commander is by no means a defeat device at all. It just is a contraption that makes the throttle itself just more snappy, right? And you need that if you put a gear in the car. So for the Hellcat, gear, pedal commander, send it. That's my base setup for a Hellcat. No tune needed, no nothing, just let her rip with that setup. That in and of itself, that by itself is a known 1060 something car in good air with a drag pack. And maybe even going a little bit quicker. And for that, you get to still keep your warranty, kind of. I mean, dude, mum's the word if you put a 309 gear in the car. So, and I like that. I like that idea of that type of a setup. So anyway, that's my number one option, right, for that car. Second is obviously tuning and throwing more fuel at it. Like with my car, very little timing added at all. Some torque management here and there, nothing major. Still pulling timing at the shift, and you're still looking at a car that even in bad weather will run a 1040 or a 1050. Very fun car, very enjoyable car to drive. Now, pulleys. Well, let's get into pulleys. And again, this is going to apply for all the Hellcat variants. There is no such thing as a pulley without a tune, and there is no such thing as a pulley or a tune on one of these cars. Or let me rewind that. There's no such thing as a pulley without fuel injectors, and there's no such thing as adding fuel injectors without a tune. If you decide to put a pulley on that car, have to put a tune on it. I have heard of far too many issues with guys that have put a Rip-A-Tune or a Hellraiser or whatever type of pulley on the car because they've been told that you can run that pulley with no tune. Absolutely incorrect. Here's what happens. Let me give you the exception to that rule, and just know that the rule is the rule and there is only the exception because all rules have exceptions, right? Can you do it? Yes, absolutely you can. If you live in a part of the country where the actual elevation that you live is higher than 1,000 feet, go for it. Because you would have to be at negative 1,000 feet to be at what I would consider to be 0 DA, or what would be considered to be 0 DA. That would mean significantly lower temperatures, very dry air, the whole bit. The point of all of this is that you don't have enough headroom in your tune to accommodate that pulley and the extra boost that it's going to make at any lower altitude than about 1,000 feet, realistically, like for practical, like real life scenarios. You're going to be maxing out an airflow table, and that airflow table just so happens to be your wide open throttle timing table. So you max out that table, then you run into a fueling problem. The car may not pull timing quick enough, or it may not pull enough timing, and you can definitely hurt the motor. So just know that coming into it. When you're seeing knock sensor voltage start to get up around 3.5 volts on one of these things, because it's going into straight up freak out mode because the knock sensors don't know what's going on, you're going to lose power. Blower makes more noise. That sets off the knock sensors, and that's why they freak out. But they could be freaking out because it's got actual knock. And again, you start messing with the fuel quality, like rewind and see the first couple of minutes of this video, and you'll see pretty quickly that, yeah, that's kind of a thing. So issues with fuel quality, low DAs, all of that can combine to where you sting a motor. So unless they're willing to cut you a check for whatever the cost is to replace that engine, and give you a Hellcat to drive in the meantime, I probably wouldn't go that route. Now, what about race gas tunes? What about E85? That's where the boosted world really comes alive. Race gas tunes and E85 work great. The only problem with the Hellcat is that there is not a viable flex fuel tune that I am aware of for the Mopars. I know there are supposed to be some that work. I keep using air quotes a lot. It's kind of a douchey thing to do. Anyway, there are some that work, and I use that term very lightly. The problem with them is that from what I've seen, the car, due to adaptive strategy, will start to learn around it. And we had, it was a Livernois tuned Trackhawk. It's supposed to be a flex fuel setup, and it didn't work very well at the shop. And it was one of these guys that he knew it all. And I guess he was out to prove all of us wrong, and didn't work out like that. This guy's Trackhawk slowly devolved into where it wouldn't want to start when it was hot. That means it's very lean on startup, which means that somewhere along the way, injector data started getting screwed with and all this other stuff. Anyway, long story short, there really isn't, or at least we haven't seen a scenario where the flex fuel thing was really an option. So that's a real long way to get to the point of you have to run. I don't know if you heard that one. Of course, Velocicito is still well in business right now. But you have to run E85 all the time. That involves injected engineering fuel system, which is the twin pump. Significantly larger injectors, 127-pound injectors, for example. These are the things that you will have to get used to, and also significantly shorter oil change intervals, things like that. All of that is stuff that you're going to have to get into before that combination is even viable. Now, they're incredibly durable at that power level. I mean, you're looking at, you do a 10% lower with a 275 upper. I mean, that is basically 1,000 horsepower at the flywheel, looking at about 8 to 815 to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno. No matter how you slice it, it's a mid 9-second car. And so, yeah, you've got this mid 9-second car, but you are now shackled to E85. And I'll just do a full stop right there. That to me is about where you need to start your modifications and where you need to stop your modifications with a Hellcat. I don't care what anybody says or wants to say about this, that, or anything else with Hellcats. The reality is that you're going to exceed what 93 octane can effectively manage on the street pretty easily. I mean, the stock car kind of does that. From there, everything that you do will be less than E85 in terms of performance. You'll get there eventually anyway. If you're modding the car, just start there. You'll save yourself a lot of money. Get the thing to the drag strip though, because on the street, it will be practically useless. So in terms of traction, and I know this because I've driven so many of those packages, I can't even see straight. But one of the funnier stories, this goes back to Racer X's car, where I was taking his car to him and delivering his car to Dallas for him. And I kid you not, the video game that I was playing with his car was what kind of fuel economy can I get on E85 on the way down there? And I was at like 19.2 or 19.4 or something like that. He calls me up. What does it feel like? And I go, I don't know. It feels good. I mean, it feels like all the other, Bravo Pazel. What's it? Is it stable under wide open throttle on the highway? And I knew what he was getting at because he was going to go playing around with the thing when I got it to him. I said, well, I'll give you a taste of it. So I pulled over, took a little bit of air out of the tires, and got back on the highway and rolling to the throttle, and it's hazing the tires through like 135 or 140 miles an hour, all the way through the 5-6 shift. And like, dude, you ruined my fuel economy. So anyway, it was just kind of funny, but that's what you're up against. You're up against a car that is going to be extremely fast, but is going to be it's a very different driving experience. And that's one of the things that is such a shining star about the 5.7 and the 6.4 versus the Hellcat. See, everything I've been talking about the Hellcat, it sounds like, oh, wow, you're really leaning towards the Hellcat. And when I say Hellcat, it's Hellcat, Red Eye, Super Stock, Demon. It's all the same to me. You're leaning more towards the Hellcat than you are the 5.7 or the 6.4. That's not really the case. What the case is that the 6.4 and the 5.7, with those two combinations, you can use every one of the horsepower that you bought on the street. You put that thing on a sticky tire, and you can play with that thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again on the street, have a ball with it, and use up every horsepower that you bought, and it's a lot of fun, right? Now, is it as fast as a Hellcat? Well, no, but that's really not the point of the conversation here. The point of it is it more fun than a Hellcat? And in a lot of respects, you can go, yeah, especially when you got you and your buddy in the car and you're mashing this thing from a dig and you're doing your 0 to 60 and you're running quarter miles with these things on the street, man. You're just hammering out and you're having fun and goofing off and you're on a little corner of Velocito. That's when those cars are a lot of fun. And you don't have to be doing 135 or 140 miles an hour to have fun in those cars. I mean, the show is over with those things around 115, 120 miles an hour. The light finally came back on, which is fine. I mean, that's plenty fast, right, for the street, especially with something that comes out of the hole so hard from a dig. The problem with the Hellcat, and this is just, for you guys with 392s that are thinking about making the switch over to the Hellcat. The problem that you're going to find with the Hellcat, among others, but the big one is that things don't get interesting with the Hellcat until about 90 miles an hour. And the reason why I say they don't get interesting until about 90 miles an hour is because by the time you hit 90, you'll think that you're doing 70 if you're used to a 392. They don't hit as hard as a 392, but they whoosh you to this speed with the power that they have. So because of that whoosh that they have, it never feels like 700 horsepower. And you guys have heard me say this before. I mean, the Hellcat is fast, but it doesn't feel as fast as it is. And so, you always hear me talking about you will know where your money has been spent. Well, in the case of the Hellcat, I'm not going to say that you won't know where your money's been spent. You will. They're fast. They're everything that you could think of, but it's not going to feel like what you would have expected 700 horsepower to feel like. The Red Eye is real torquey down low, but it basically, in my opinion, I know what it's rated at, but to me, it feels like that curve is rocked. So from your point of view, like if this is the horsepower or torque curve or whatever of a Hellcat, it feels like with the Red Eye, it's just kicked up a little bit in the ass, and that's about it. They feel about the same up top, but because they start out with more torque, they almost feel like they nose over more. And, the rest of the lineup is all basically the same. So just know that, what's the best value per dollar? Probably the 392. What's the most fun per dollar? Either a Scat Pack core or a 5.7 that you're planning on doing a lot of work to. What's the best value overall? The Hellcat and its derivatives, because it holds its value the best. So hopefully that answers some of the questions, gives you some directions that I like to go with in terms of what works, what doesn't work, what I've seen that works with these cars. I didn't really hang on camshafts too much with 392s, primarily because there's a very narrow window of camshafts that work for a 392. And as you hover somewhere around that 220, 230 range, 222, 228 range, 224, 228 range, right around in that area, you'll be in pretty decent shape. Just watch out for the intake that you plan on running. And do your research, do your homework. That is going to be the most valuable thing that you do in your pursuit of making one of these things fast, because, man, to be honest with you, manufacturers like to fill your head full of some bullshit. So just know that coming into it. So I'm going to catch up with a few questions, just kind of pick some at random here, and then that will be it. So let's see, just picking some here at random. Pitch Black saying, thanks, Mason and Riff. You got it. BB78 saying, thanks always for your sage advice. Thank you for hanging out, brother. Peanut Head saying, yo, what's up, Peanut? Pitch Black saying, used to use the Tri-5Rs on his 04 Cobra for daily. All of us did. I ran them on my Lightning. It's the only tires I would put on the back of that truck. The awesome tires. Summer saying, sweet, 53 likers, 53 likes. I like it. Oh, Pitch Black saying, welds are not for rain, but I'm in Florida, so sometimes there's no way to avoid it. Checking if there's 17 by 10 daily-ish, just in case I don't remember to change wheels out with the dailies. That's when you can go with the ET Street SS. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that it's a great tire in the rain, but at least it has a tread pattern. I just don't think that the G2, not the G2, the Nitto 555 R2 is supported in that size, the wheel size. Rift is saying, he loves his pedal commander, not as much as my 6-speed SRT8, but the Hellcat, it's nice. Yep, absolutely. Let's see. Oh, 62 saying, hello, B. I'm entering the land of modded Hellcats tuned on 93 and GT260 plus 1050 ID injectors, GripTech 285, upper pulley, pin, crank, DSS, drag radials, diff brace, cradle, lockout, trailing arms, and trans tune, dyno tune. Very nice. Oh, that's one thing. So, so we're talking about modifications. We're mainly talking about engine stuff, but 6.2 brings up a pretty good point here with, the cradle lockouts and diff braces and all of those things. Look, they all work. They all work fine. Don't look for them to make a massive difference, but they work well enough and they keep you involved with the car. I would never tell you not to do any of those modifications to your car. But what I will tell you is this: if you choose to lower your car, this is just some kind of sideshow advice here. When you lower your car, it is mandatory for you to get that thing aligned. What happens is you've got a little bit of negative camber to your back wheels. So instead of being perfectly flat, they're kind of kicked up just a little bit. They get weight on them, and so they kind of flatten out a little bit. But talking about the tire. But it's never a flat, square surface on the ground. When you load that thing even more, or when you lower it, that angle becomes more. Okay, this is a bit of an exaggeration, but ain't by much. So your footprint becomes less. The actual weight of the car is sitting on a smaller portion of that tire because it's angled, right? So what you want to do is make sure that if you lower the car, you get it aligned so that you're back to as close as factory spec as you can get. Makes a big difference with how the car will handle, and it'll make an even bigger difference with how it accelerates, especially if you're running on stock or stock-ish tires. Make sure I got to everybody, and then we are going to wrap it up here, guys, because I've got to wake up crazy early in the morning. Thanks to all of y'all. Appreciate each and every one of y'all. Love each and every one of y'all. And do appreciate y'all being on the chat. So with that, I'm going to send it, don't bend it. Keep your shiny side up. Get your shots. In fact, I get my second shot on Friday. Wish me luck. Y'all have a great one. We will catch up with you. I may be doing a track chat this Friday. I will let you know. Whoa, hang on a minute. CFL, thank you very much, man. I just caught this saying, just saw my local dealer took in a 19 red-eye narrow body with 3,000 miles black with red leather interior. Cool. What should be the key things to look at? I might miss that you would look at if you are buying. Okay, well, obviously, give the thing the third degree. You're going to want to look at, first of all, look underneath it and see if it's got a bunch of caked on rubber all over the underneath part of that car. Look behind the fender well, too. You may find it back there. Car could have been raced or beat up or ragged out. Other things you want to look at the coolant levels, look at the oil, check the oil, make sure it's been changed. At that low of mileage, it should have already had an oil change. Look at the brakes, look at the rotors, look to see if there's any scoring with the brakes. Check just general fitment of everything. Make sure the door is closed. Make sure it wasn't wrecked. Just give it a good solid once over. But those are some things that I would look at initially. And if you decide to get it, that'd be a sweet deal. That's a sweet looking car. Black with red interior would be awesome. Yeah, that would be super slick. But thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. But that's some of the things that I would look for. One other thing, depending on what side of the world you're on, check the hood latches, the latch, make sure it's not rusting or anything like that. Check the trunk. It's too new to have any rust issues. Yeah, I think you'd be in really good shape with that car. I mean, if you decide you want to go there. The thing about a red eye is they are real strong out of the hole, and they're a lot of fun to drive. And there, as you guys know, there was a point in time where I was looking at a red eye instead of the Hellcat, and I wasn't going to do anything to it other than a pedal commander and leave it alone. I figure it'll be a lot of fun, you know, a 1030 car that would still have warranty, and you could just drive the thing until the wheels fell off of it and you'd be still covered under warranty, presumably. So great car. No real downside to it other than the tune is a little bit soft from the factory, but great car nonetheless. And again, they do all their business down low. Those things are monsters out of the hole. So, but yeah, I had actually spec'd out a white Hellcat red eye, 309 gear, rear seat delete, Alcantara interior, and that was about it. And that was going to be my my next car, but at the time they just wanted too much money. And then Revlon showed up, and the rest, as you know, is history. Let's see. Non-X is asking, what are your opinions on spark plug followers to get rid of the PO430 code on a ProCharge 6.1? Never ran into that. So good question. I'm not sure what exactly you're running into with that. Spark plug followers, unless that's like a ceramic deal or something like that. I'm just not aware of that, buddy. Never ran into that. But again, guys, with that, I have got to wrap it up. Again, love each and every one of you guys. Thank you all very much. Can't wait to see you on the next one. I will try to do a track chat, though, this Friday. We'll see how the car is doing. And on the next one, we're going to be talking about fuel quality, boosting, Torco, and the like. And does it work? Yes, it works. Do I recommend it? Only if you've got a boosted car. So at any rate, Y'all take it easy. We'll catch you on the next one. That is a wrap. Adios.